Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this session. Top 10 things to check out when you get a new MCAE or when you join an organisation that has got MCAE. We were just saying, we've had a few people ask, oh, what is MCAE today? We realised we should have put the /pardot still because not everyone is familiar.
Lessons learned, lessons learned.
We'll probably be referring to it as both throughout the presentation, as does everyone still. So my name's Abigail. I work for Advice UK. I've always worked for non-profits my entire career, but transitioned more to the Salesforce side about 5 years ago. Worked at Supermums for a bit, which is a few of you may know me from, and now at Advice UK. I look after Salesforce. I really liked Salesforce when I understood what it was and was definitely decided to pursue that as a career, but then I became more of an accidental Pardot/MCAE admin and am now certified. So I've seen inside a few orgs, and I think the thing to know why Vicki and I paired up is we're sort of two different sides of the coin. I'm on the user end, and having worked for non-profits my whole career, I'm also a bit of a realist about the way things just have to be done and what you have to deal with in real life. So I am presenting today. I've met many great people along the way, some of you in the room, and I'm presenting today with Vicki.
Yeah, and thanks for the introduction. I know some of you here already. For those of you who I don't know, hi. My name's Vicki, and I was an English teacher in a past life, so remote teaching and things like that, not at all the Salesforce world. Met Abby at Supermums, and then since then have transitioned into teaching the boot camps with Salesforce, and then also a solution architect at Sama Consulting. So really, we've been in the same shoes, we've been in the same situation as the accidental admins for MCAE, for Pardot, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm playing the other side of the coin, so really understanding what I wish people would look at in their orgs as a consultant when I'm coming in to talk with them.
So this time last year, I was in this room, but in the audience. I don't think it was this room, it might have been one next door, and I heard a talk that was about the top things you should look at when you join a new organisation as a Salesforce admin, and what are the things you should be checking out as soon as you start. And then shortly after that, I started the role I'm in now, and also got given Pardot or MCAE, and was like, I wish I had this checklist for doing this, because I hadn't come across anything that was quite what I was looking for. So mentioned it to a few people and then got the old, well, if no one else has done it, maybe you should do it. And so here we are today. And I've got Vicki for her great technical expertise as well, so hopefully with a dream team who can give you some insights today. So with that, we've got 10 tips we want to rock through today. We could spend the whole hour talking about just one slide, but that's not what today is about. It's just about the top 10 things that you then maybe need to go away and do a little bit more research on. So we're really just giving you the top line advice today, and we'll take some questions at the end, if there's any more detail you need.
Yeah, so I'll kick us off. What's the first tip? Well, knowing what you've got in the first place. There's this little place in Pardot that's called the account settings, and you don't really know it's here. It's not in the setup menu like everything else in Salesforce, but really important to know what you've got to start with, because if you're anything like me, I was on a lower edition of the growth edition, when I was starting as a Pardot admin, accidental Pardot admin, and had all of these things that you're looking at on Trailhead and seeing all of these features, these functionality, really cool, let me go in and do that, and then I'd have that moment of, I can't find it. It's not here, or I can't access it. And it does come from this little thing called the account type, knowing what edition you have to know what is going to be at your fingertips in the first place. And also getting to know your friendly neighborhood AE or account executive, because sometimes there's certain things that you might have negotiated, certain things that might be considerations about what you've got, what you're paying for, what you're not, and they're going to be the ones to have more information about actually what's on your account in the first place that you might not be able to see here. And yeah, there's a second part to this, isn't there?
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to make sure, certainly when I joined and was just getting to know the org, was, okay, are there any red flags? Like, I just want to know everything's ticking over okay. Where do I need to look first to make sure there's nothing I need to deal with straight away? And this is one of the top places you want to look for possibly finding some red flags. In this screen capture we've got here is some little top line of the usage and limits. And we can see here, this is a demo org of Vicki's, so we're nicely in the blue here. If any of this is in the red, you're going to want to jump on it. So here here, it's not included in this screenshot, but you've got things like your prospect limit for a start, things like forms and landing pages. If you're near the limits on any of those, you're going to want to know about it quite quickly and deal with it and talk to your marketing team. So a little bit later, one of the things we talk about is knowing what's coming for the marketing team, because if they're about to send out a big new marketing campaign and you're at 9,500 prospects, you might have a problem. So check it out.
And if it looks like this right now and you're walking into it, it means that they're probably not using Pardot the way they should be. So if it looks this empty, that might be a different kind of signal for you.
It could go either way. So now you know kind of what you've got. Now it's about knowing who's got access to that stuff in the org. So who are your key users? Identify, obviously, some marketing people, hopefully, but you never know with organizations who else has potentially the keys to the kingdom, and that's one of the biggest red flags to look at here, I think. Has everyone been made an admin? That is probably quite a big red flag to look out for, especially if they don't really know what they're doing. So check out who are your key users across the whole business, what access do they have, and do they know what they're doing with it? That's probably just through some informal conversations, finding out, do people like the platform? Are they making the most of it? Do they seem to know what they're doing? Have they done any trailheads? And that'll give you a good idea of if there's anything you need to address here. Also, just like to mention other stakeholders across the business. So yes, you've got your basic users, but there are a lot of other people in the business who might not be using Pardot in the traditional sense, but have a stake in what goes on with it. So here we're thinking about people who are in charge of data protection, GDPR, things like that, and making sure you've identified who they are in case you need to speak to them.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next thing, which are the sync errors. So how many people here have sync errors in their Pardot work? Yeah, a couple of hands up. How many people are not being honest about that right now? So sync errors are these things that are sometimes hidden away. We don't even know to look at them. And when you go into your connectors and you're in the Salesforce connector, then you've got the sync errors in here. And right now I've got 0. This doesn't usually happen very often. Again, a demo work. I've gone into some clients that say that they have really good control over their sync errors, and they're the ones with like 5,000 sync errors. And then I have other ones that say, oh, we've got so many sync errors, I'm sorry about it, we're going to be on top of it and fixing it. And I go in and they have 10. So it's not always a bad thing to have a whole bunch of sync errors at the same time, but these are definitely something that you want to look into. Again, we're here to talk about all of the things that you're supposed to do before touching anything in Pardot. This is one of the things to look at and see what's the damage. Do we have those infamous pick lists that are causing problems? Because if somebody changed a field and didn't realize that it affected Pardot, then it actually tanked the whole system. So that means the prospect record isn't syncing anymore, a whole bunch of issues. Who's going to be resolving them as well? So who is that person? Is that you? Is this part of your new role, or is this somebody else? And what kind of communication do you need to have with your Salesforce team potentially? Yeah, and then going through, just continuing on really, our sync process. So what is going on between Pardot and Salesforce? Because we don't always realize how closely they're tied together, but really Pardot's just sitting on top of the Salesforce platform, which means that there's a lot of things that we can control that we don't necessarily think about. And there may have been decisions made at a certain time, or maybe it was just set up and somebody didn't know what it was doing in the first place. So what's going on in the background? What's those sync settings in the first place? Are we automatically creating leads from prospects? Are we not automating any of that and it's all going through buttons that people are clicking? What kinds of objects and custom fields are syncing with each other in the first place? Again, before clicking anything, before doing anything, you need to understand what's going on.
I think we might have a bit of a connector issue here.
Yeah, I think so. I apologize for that. Trying to work the cord.
It's this room, I was here.
It's the room.
Not a room. So on that note, obviously the relationship between you and your Salesforce admin is going to be really important, making sure, well, to go back, if that is 2 people, in my roles, I've actually always had oversight over both, so I don't even know what it's like to try and manage that relationship, and I take for granted the knowledge I have in both, that one thing I do in one place might affect something that's happening in the other, but something really important to do, again, about knowing your users is about knowing who the admins are, who's got access to what, who has the potential to be able to change things in the org, because potentially it's just not the system admin and the people who should be changing things, but lots of other people as well. So making sure that you build that relationship formally through meetings, but also informally to make sure you're kind of on each other's side and working together to make sure the system functions as it should.
And that brings us to our next tip, which is checking this nice big thing I called deliverability. Yeah, we've got some corny jokes sprinkled in through.
So yeah, I like this meme. Credit to the blog that I found it on. I haven't found it. It's a tricky one because, yeah, marketers love, yeah, we've sent this many thousand emails, but as we know, that doesn't necessarily actually mean anything. Has it actually got to the right people? Are the right people getting it at the right time? Is it going anywhere at all? Because if it's bouncing, it's not even getting out there. So another one, this one's a bit like the sync errors. Do people even know this exists? And I fortunately, annoyingly recently, found the report. Back in the day, you used to have to go to every email to find the bounces that were happening and then sort them all out individually, whereas a much easier way now through reports to find out what is bouncing. And again, like Vicki mentioned with the sync process, is there a process? Is anyone on it? Has anyone got this? Do they know what's happening? Are they sorting it out? Again, numbers-wise, it depends on the size of your org, what is and isn't good. You're always going to have some. There are always going to be a few. It's kind of one of the inevitable things about email marketing, but making sure you're on top of it. And yeah, do you know how bad it is?
Yeah. And that brings us to the next part of this, which is, do we need to clean our lists? Are you cleaning your lists in the first place? Marketers like to hoard contacts and prospects and say that we like to have a whole nice long list of people. But actually, it's kind of like taking your medicine. It's something that we don't want to hear as a marketer, but it's good for us to go through that list hygiene and actually remove people who shouldn't be there in the first place. So is there anybody doing that? What do our lists look like? Do we have thousands of lists that have never been used before? They've even rolled out a new feature helping us to convert any of those dynamic lists that we're not using, that haven't been used recently, into static lists for us. So how bad is it? Kind of taking a view of the state of things right now, how many people have opted out, to really telling your team that they might need to take their medicine in the first place. That brings us very nicely into the preference center, so back to you.
List management. So preference center, is there one for a start? So go and find out what is on it. Is it up to date with the lists that are currently actually being used? And are the marketing team actually using it on the bottom of emails? Or are they just using unsubscribe, for example? So your preference center, if you don't know, is that thing that you kind of go to and click on when you get an email, so you can opt down, not out, and we want down, not out. So yeah, Vicki came up with this expression, which I really liked, down, not out. So it means that you still have permission to email people and perhaps add them to different lists in the future as you find out more out about them. But they can not be flooded with the information they don't want and avoid them opting out completely, which then is much more tricky to resolve. I know that we're Advice UK, who I work for now, is a membership organisation, and there are certain messages we need to make sure we get to our members, so it's important they feel they're getting the right message at the right time and not getting flooded with things they don't want, but can opt in, still remain opt-in, so we can make sure that they get the information that they need.
Yeah, and just how many of us have signed up for something like at a retail store or something like that and then got flooded with emails, and if you go to the unsubscribe, then you have no choice but to opt out of everything. So we don't want to lose those people.
And it's a nice, relatively quick, easy win that might make quite a big difference if your marketing team aren't using it.
Yeah, and then understanding what lists might be on that preference center in the first place. So do we have any dynamic lists? Do we have any static lists that are exposed on that preference center? And if we do have a lot of dynamic lists, what type of criteria is it? Because that's the one where it's completely hands-off. We have no control over who is going to be on that list. We say set the criteria, and then the system takes it from there. So what kinds of lists do we have? Dynamic, that might be on the preference center, that might not be. The preference center is definitely the important ones to look at. And then also what kind of static lists do we have and how can people get onto them in the first place? Because static lists, the members on those lists, the prospects coming in, can be coming in from so many different places. So is it a preference center where people are opting themselves in and out? Is it the Salesforce users, like on this little component over here, that we have the prospect list? And are we letting our Salesforce users add people from the contact record, from the lead record? And if we are, did somebody realize that they could do this and put 50 different lists up there and nobody on the sales team is actually using them because they just have too much to scroll through? Can they understand the names of those lists and what is going to come on after them? And what kinds of lists are triggering engagements? It's really nice to put the word nurture in there, but if we're not, do we know that adding somebody to a list is actually sending them into a nurture program afterwards? So again, coming back to that idea of who's doing the cleanup, how many lists do we have in the first place that somebody was like, yeah, I needed this right now and I'm gonna leave it there because maybe on a rainy day I might need it in the future.
Yeah, I really like that tip about the naming conventions, so your users know what's happening with those lists. That was definitely a
so important
when we were preparing this. So this is quite a big one here, and I like Vicki. This is Vicki's little pet.
Yes, had to stick some animals up here, so that's my cat and dog. But yeah, what is the current strategy in the first place? So do we have marketing strategy alignment in the first place with our team, with the organization, or has part of it kind of been something that we stuck on and nobody knew what it did, or nobody took it from the marketing side of things? So what's the current strategy? Is there one in the first place? If there isn't, that might be a red flag to look for in the first as well. And who is the audience? So do we know who we're targeting? Do we know what kind of personas that we're working with as an organization? Or are we doing a lot of guesswork and just kind of hoping for the best? Yeah, some of that can be coming into things like the content calendar. So I'm going to hand it over to Abby to tell us some stories about that one.
So if they're yeah, you might say content calendar, whatever, list of stuff that's going to be happening. Not actually a content calendar. Does someone somewhere know what might be happening? You probably want to go and have a chat with that person or those people, depending on the size of your organization, and make sure you've got a good handle on it. A lot of this, again, is about also volume. So how many people are they expecting to engage through this, whatever is on the content calendar coming up, and is that going to impact any of the decisions that you make about what you need to deal with first in your priority list? So find out what is on the content calendar, but also any other key glaringly obvious dates kind of within the business as well. So I know that at Advice UK, when I first joined, one of the big dates that was looming was our renewals process. So that's about when we're a membership organisation and all our members have to renew at a certain point in the year. So making sure that was front and centre of mind so that we were, had dealt with any red flags and got everything sorted before, well in time for that process to happen. And knowing that information is really going to help you formulate what you move on to next and how you prioritize these things. Because, as I said, we're flying through the top 10 tips, but some of these could take a while to go and delve into. So it's about prioritizing those is going to be one of your first tasks.
Yeah, and making friends with the right people too, because it might be that you're introduced to people as part of your onboarding and say, oh, you're going to be working really closely with so-and-so, and it might be great to form that relationship and to build onto that relationship. But actually having coffee with some cross-functional teams and realizing that what you're doing may be impacting them, what they're doing might be impacting you. So it's just about trying to get alignment over the whole organization and making friends with buttering up the right people.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about kind of making friends across the organisation, and the element we were talking about with this unexpected friends, what we wanted to get across was the idea that you need to know all your users, and obviously the people in the marketing team are going to be some of the people you're going to need to work with closely, but who are also those super users? We all know in Salesforce we come across people who have just taken it on in their organization who are maybe in another team but suddenly get the Salesforce bug or get the Pardot bug and want to go for it. And they're the people who are really going to be your allies. And they might not even be the most senior people in the team. They might be in unexpected places, but they're your little helpers that you can bring with you on the journey and get you to help work through some of this stuff. So really seek those people out because, yeah, we're all trailblazers, right?
Yeah, and it might be that person who's having coffee with you and says, oh, what if we did this? And you're like, oh, I never would have thought of that before. So ideas can come from everywhere. Yeah, and that brings us to the case of conflicting automation. So we have a nice web here and a little literature quote, what a tangled web we weave, because automation can be doing all kinds of things that we don't know about. So I know one time I was on a health check for an organization. It was a Pardot health check. So we were coming in to look at their Pardot system, spend an hour with them, see like the state of affairs, what is the damage. And we went through, did it, yeah, it was good, they're doing okay. And then we got to the end and they said, oh, but I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and I saw that you're Salesforce certified, like you know the CRM side of things. I was like, yeah, I know a thing or two about that. So they ask, well, can I ask you some questions about it? We're having some trouble and we can't figure out this problem on the CRM. I said, absolutely, show me what you've got. And they started to go in and say, well, I don't know where these leads are coming from. So it actually ended up being a Pardot problem, and we never would have uncovered that otherwise. So that just goes to show that there can be things that look to the users like they are in Salesforce, and it's coming from Salesforce, it's doing something with the leads. That can't be Pardot, but we all know it can be. So really understanding what the automation is doing and what's happening with it. Where's it coming from in the first place, and should it be coming from there? Those leads were all being created by automation rules in Pardot. So we have so much we can be using. We can be using completion actions, automation rules, the engagement programs can even be doing things automatically. So what's going on and how does it all weave together?
Yeah, when I first joined at Vice UK, actually, one of the things to look at was our contact us form and where things were going and where they're getting to the right people. And again, this is where my I'm a bit of a realist hat comes on, because small organizations, small charities can still have really complex kind of needs and business cases, but we can't always afford all the jazzy tools to make it happen. So we've got to work with what we've got. And yeah, we wanted to shoot off. We had quite defined pick list values, to get technical, on that shot people off in different directions, but we were running out of things like completion actions to make it happen in the way we wanted to. So I had to go in and uncover, which completion action is doing what, but then there was some confusion because there was like an automation rule as well that was doing something else. And then I found one of the best things to do with this, if you want to uncover it, is actually, even though you're looking at the bigger picture, is to get quite granular. So I kind of couldn't figure it out, so I thought, right, let's go and look at a couple of individual prospects. And it took me longer than it should have probably to realize the use of the prospect audit tab, which was actually one of the best places to have a look. Okay, with this, let's pick a few individuals from different scenarios and see what's happened to them. And it will actually tell you what changed, what pick list value, what automation rule they went through, what completion action was applied to them, so you can actually see the chain of what was happening. And getting that specific is what really helped me kind of unpick what was going on and understand what was happening in the system. So even if you don't need to do anything about it, it's a good thing to do, to go and look at that granular detail, find a few prospects, or put your own test record in, delete it afterwards, just to see what happens and go on that journey.
And that actually brings us very nicely into your invisible colleague that you might not have met yet when you were onboarding, but who is doing a lot of things in the background. So we have Casper the Friendly Ghost, who is handling all of your engagement programs. So do you know what's going on here? What is this colleague doing in the first place? What's going on that you don't know about? What have they been doing in the background there? Are they pulling their weight? Are they even being used? Are there any engagement programs? Or are they flying under the radar? Are they doing a whole bunch of stuff that nobody realizes that they're actually doing that in the first place? Do they know what they're doing? That's a really important one to figure out. And then, are they delivering their objectives? Maybe somebody set this up and the invisible colleague was doing things in the background, and we didn't realize that the business process has changed. It was set up 5 years ago. We've evolved quite a bit as a business, and all of a sudden he is no longer delivering his objectives in the first place.
And this one's a really good sell, I think, into your team as well. So as alongside Vicki and I kind of working on this presentation, we're also looking at what we're doing with MCAE internally, and at the point of really wanting to start to leverage this tool in particular quite a lot more. And so the team had asked for some insights. Okay, can we have a reminder across the business of what Pardot is and what it does? So I did a little presentation covering some of the basics and mentioned Engagement Studio. And I know some of the team at the moment, we're in a really great process of like change, loads happening, which is great, but there's also with that the worry that people are going to have a lot to do, and like saying, hey, I've got this like guy in the background who we're not using at the moment that can do some of that legwork for you. So although it's selling them to the idea that we need to put a little bit of work in now to understand what it is we need to do and build and how we can leverage this the best way for you, but honestly, this invisible colleague is really going to like be your best friend if we can make it work for you.
Yeah, now we're up to our last tip, which is really the reporting metrics that we're going to be talking through.
Yeah, so as I said, we're not about delving into how to do all of this. Thank goodness, that's a whole nother session. Tell me where it is, because I need to go to that session as well. But make sure you understand, our top tip is to make sure you understand the expectations on reporting within your business. So as I mentioned, I've always worked for charities. Charities have a board of trustees that often require reports of various descriptions to be sent to them at very specific times of the year. Our board meets quarterly, so we know we've always got to have that top of mind to know that those reports have got to be ready. So it's one of those things of making sure you know what there already is, like we said, just looking, understanding the reports. Going and delving into the reports is also the kind of, it's like a really great thing to do on two levels, because yes, you're going to need to make sure these reports are up to date, but this is also going to give you a lot of intel as to what is going on in the org if you're new to it. Because people will tell you one thing, but well, the stats do sometimes lie, but hopefully not. That is going to give you a lot of vital intel into what is happening in the org. So is leadership expecting any reporting, and are you well prepared for it? Make sure your data is ready. What level of reporting is required and who across the business needs it. So we did mention leadership requiring reporting. That's usually quite a top-level summary, what is the impact we're having. But there's a whole other range of reports that we can get access to that are a bit more detailed for the actual marketing team themselves that can help them make decisions about if what they're doing is effective and any changes they need to make. So think about the different levels of reporting. There's probably also some that you're going to want to do as an admin or in a team about kind of the health of the org as well, things you can check in on to make sure that everything is running as it should. So really have a little look, see what is already there, familiarise yourself with it, and if there isn't any, which if you're in a really small org, kind of in a charity, there might not be. This is a really great place where you can add some value. So people are always going to be grateful for understanding more about what is happening across the organisation, so it's a really great opportunity for you as well to come in and say, hey, we haven't got any reports, but do you want some? And really add some value in that way.
Yeah, and that kind of brings it back full cycle, doesn't it? Because what we are showing here is a B2B dashboard report. Not everybody has these. So it comes back to that first tip of knowing what you've got in the first place. Do you have fancy reports that look like this? Or are you using the reports that are just in Pardot because you don't have access? This is an add-on for certain editions and all of that good stuff as well. And I would even say that coming from customers that are larger organizations, you would almost expect them to have more objectives and things like that. Not always the case. And sometimes it's about finding out what those objectives are to be able to show the value of the tool, the ROI of Pardot in the first place, so that when the AE calls up and says, it's time to renew, do you want to pay to renew your contract? The organization can just go, oh yeah, we've been doing all of our reporting and we have all of these metrics that we're able to show for it. So what's going to get those type of sign-offs to be able to renew when the renewal period comes up? And this is something that if you've ever sat on one of my classes before, you've probably heard me say this, so sorry, you've got to listen to it again. But my kids are very much so at the Julia Donaldson, let's read books in English all the time phase. This is from a little storybook called Zog about the flying dragon who's at dragon school and learning all of these different things. And now that you've been shown, you can practice on your own and you'll all be Pardot superstars by the time you're fully grown. So It fits every scenario, every situation. But really, what you're going to be doing, because we want to be talking about what you're doing before you're touching anything in Pardot. You've just onboarded, you've got a new org. First, you understand. So you go through all of these tips, you understand what's going on, you understand what the red flags are, things like that. Then you go and read. So you go and read blogs, help articles, Google searches, help documentation.
Go to events.
Yeah. Trailhead, whatever is going to help you to understand what the functionality should be looking like. Are we following best practice in the first place? All of that fun stuff. And then reacting. So reacting is going to be the last part of it, really starting to understand what you're going to do first. Abby's going to talk to us more about prioritization, so I won't step on her toes. But starting to take all of these tips and action them.
Yeah, so as Vicki said, start with prioritization. So make sure you've got in the back of your mind some of this research that you've gathered around what your content calendar is, what's the strategy. One thing we didn't mention as well is also the business plan. I find that really, really helpful to always keep going back to if you're unsure where the priorities lie, what is going to have the greatest impact in helping the organization as a whole reach their goals, because I think I've just been having some conversations here today as well about one of the constant challenges of kind of especially people in smaller organizations where there's always a lot going on, you've got to wear multiple hats, trying to decide what to tackle first can be really challenging. So definitely it's about outlining those red flags. Hopefully we've told you where to go to look to find some of those red flags. Deal with those first, get yourself into sort of a level playing field where you feel like, okay, everything's kind of all right, it's ticking over. Then let's have a look at what we can do. And hopefully as well, you know, we've gone through this with lots of tips about things you can go and look at, but also this could also form sort of like an outline for any handover you do as well. So what are the questions you should be asking, hopefully, someone who you're taking over from or people who are still within the org? Because some of them will have this information at their fingertips and maybe give you more in-depth, useful bits of intel as well. So definitely make use of those people, because I also recently have, you know, I transitioned out of my first Salesforce role into a new one, so I had to do a handover to someone and then be on the receiving end of a handover. And sometimes it can be quite tricky when there's a lot to know where to start, but hopefully something like this will give you a bit of an outline. So once you've dealt with the red flags, or at least put them on a list to deal with, then it's about making the wish list. And this is the element for you, like where can you really add value and start to show the organization kind of what you're bringing to the table as well. So again, this kind of goes to some of the read element of what Vicki was saying. Be out there in the community, know what all the new features are. What is the business plan? How can you leverage some of those features that they're not yet using to work towards those goals? And again, that helps show the organization kind of your value and the value of the product itself and gain more buy-in across the organization if everyone can have an understanding of that. Then be proactive and take ownership. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, and sometimes that proactive part is about getting out of your comfort zone, because when you're getting into a new role, you're at least I am, always a little bit shaky. You're trying to find your legs, you're trying to find what the way of the world is. And it's really uncomfortable to start to take on that ownership and to be the one who's saying, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, or we're going to prioritize, who do I need to get into the room? But really getting out of your comfort zone is really going to help you to be proactive, to take ownership of the system, and then be able to make the most out of it, and just to jump into that role head first. Not always the easiest thing, but. And then, because this is Abby's first time speaking at a Salesforce conference, I have brought her into my corny puns, because dad jokes are not just for dads, moms can have them too. So, leaving you with a couple of these here. Things will get better. If you're feeling blue, be a good cheer, be strong. I live in France, so I have to bring the cheese with me. And then,
Although you're taking home a massive pile of cheddar.
Yeah, I am bringing home a massive cheddar, but it's in Sylvia's refrigerator right now. Walked into her house with like 4 bricks of cheddar in my hand, not even putting my suitcase down yet, but that's okay. And we're all rooting for you. So you've got an awesome community here. You've got people in the room. You've got people speaking, just basically anybody that you can walk up to. We're all rooting for you. So you've got this. And now I'm going to make Abby do one, because it's like a rite of passage.
I hate being cheesy like that. Yeah. Belief in yourself, yeah. Lots of encouragement. That is the great thing about the community, right? Everyone's very friendly. It is my first time talking, but I knew this would be like a friendly space in which to do it. So thank you all for attending. We're giving you loads of encouragement. And this is, it's very food-based puns considering it's lunchtime. It's definitely making it hungry. We know what's on our minds. So with that, we're just about on time, actually, because we've just got a few minutes for questions, if anyone has them. And I believe I'm supposed to give this out.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say like a huge thank you for our sponsors before we go to questions, because we wouldn't be here without them. So now questions.
Okay, I'm going to take the roving mic around. Yes.
Firstly, can you do this talk at the Pardot user group, please? It was secondly, so you mentioned bringing people on that journey with you, and I think that was a really important point. So you've done the fact-finding, you're having those coffees, people are making those insights. What would you recommend people do to bring others on board with that journey as well?
I actually just did this with a client the other day because I work virtually. I've worked virtually, I've worked remotely for years. But actually going into the office and meeting with all of them and having lunch together, having coffee, like and just getting to know people in the office, introducing yourself, one of the ways to do it. And if you are virtual, just tap on random people's shoulders and ask them if they'd like to drink a 10-minute coffee together online, like just catching up and starting to understand what they do, but also just getting to know them as an individual and building those relationships.
I think that getting to know them as an individual, like, yes, about their personal goals, but also the goals that they have in their role, because people are going to buy into it if they understand that it's going to help them progress. You know, essentially, we're all at work, we've all got things to achieve, we just need to get our jobs done. So if you can, that's where it says it goes back to having that, that's where a good business plan really helps, and everyone understanding and being on the same page about what you're trying to achieve and helping them understand that you are going to help them do that and reach their goals and help them be successful, and that's what you're there for. So I think that's important as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, some questions over the back. I'm coming. Run,
Abby.
Hi, thank you. I just had a question. I've inherited account engagement. We've actually been using Web to Lead in Salesforce before we started using account engagement. So like we're using Web to Lead rather than like using the forms and that side of it in account engagement. So I just wondered, have you encountered this scenario before, and how would you sort of handle it in terms of should we switch from one to the other or do them both or sort of stick as we are?
Some sort of typical Salesforce answer that it depends.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. You completely stepped on my toes there. It depends. Yeah, it's about going into what that decision, why was that decision made in the first place? Is there somebody who knows why that conscious decision was made? Because sometimes there's a reason to use Web to Lead rather than using a Pardot form. But you can do things like use form handlers. So maybe you stick a form handler on that and you're using a form handler so that it's still treating it almost as a Pardot form. Pardot forms have a couple of limitations of their own, so it's not always going to be the tool of choice. It's really going to be a business decision about whether you use that, whether you use Web to Lead, whether you use another form tool altogether. But making sure that it's tying back into Pardot, I would say, is important. The form handler part, definitely.
I'd say I was in a BA talk with Leanne this morning, and I think it goes back to that thing of not looking at the solution first, but go right back to the initial question of what you're trying to achieve, what's the outcome here, what do we need to be happening, what's the process, and then trying to answer that question to decide, like back to square one really, to decide what is going to be the best solution. Mm-hmm. Right, one more question down here.
Hi, so for this disclaimer, I'm Marketing Cloud more than Pardot, but this applies for both. So number 6, the list management. How do you manage up? So if you have lists that need cleaned, how do you convince upper management that this list needs cleaning without like always risking, oh, the legal action is and that, because people are not going to be very friendly when you bring that up all the time. So how do you approach it? You worked across many orgs, so what kind of approach do you take or do you suggest? Thank you.
I've had that happen so many times and have had the same conversation over and over again. It is like a very hard pill for them to swallow because, like I said, it's like a marketing thing that we want to hoard all of the prospects. We want that list to be nice and long. If you start to talk about the impact of what happens if they don't clean their lists, it's going to be potentially damaging their sender reputation if people aren't opening those emails. What does a damaged sender reputation mean? Well, it means that the emails might not get into the inbox. They might end up in the junk folder. And then if it gets really bad, what's the cost to the business of doing nothing right now and then having to recuperate from that bad sender reputation in the future? If you spell that out for them, usually that's the convincing point for the leadership team to be like, okay, I need to deal with this now, because if we get to that point, it's going to cost us a lot more time, a lot more money, our reputation in the first place. Our emails just aren't going to get through.
I think it goes back a bit to our favourite thing as well, which can be, one of our best friends is the reporting side of things as well. So showing them, it depends on who the person is and what they respond to as well, because some people respond to a really specific case study user story or something, or do they need to see the data, see like, look, this is the problem. But also from that angle, trying to really talk up the small wins. So if you do convince them to make a change, making sure you report that and then can report back on it and say, look, we did this and it meant this and then we achieved this. Yeah. So being able to have that loop to get that culture of like, oh, okay, we make a change, it has an impact, that was a positive step, let's now do another thing. It kind of encourages people to come with you a little bit, I think.
Yeah, what are their levers?
Yeah. Again, it does go back to building relationships, it really does.
Oh,
and understanding, what's going to bring people on board with you.
And I think that leaves us with 1 minute left, so we're doing pretty good. I don't think we have time for any other questions, but if you do have them, go onto the WOVA app. There's places to ask them. We'll be answering throughout the day. Otherwise, just find us on LinkedIn. We're around. We're somewhat friendly. We don't bite too often. But thank you all for joining, and congrats on Abby for her first Freaking.